Open source issues. Should AI be regulated?
Very pleased to be back on this stage again and to do this panel. Yes, we already heard quite a bit about the burning issues in regulation. Here we want to wrap up a little bit more in a more general way and looking at problems. And regulation always has a tendency to be a little bit late because the governments are usually reacting delayed. Self-regulation very often is own interest-driven, so it's not always the answer. And of course, we have the cross-border issue making things not any easier. So let me take or see the academic perspective first. Joshua, you published quite a bit about this issue, and how is your stance on it? What do you think where we are standing?
So I think the first thing is it's important to decide what is AI, like really what are we trying to regulate? In computer science, we have been using or we developed AIs in the 50s, 60s. Hasn't changed much. The only thing that's changed is we have more computational power, which means we can do much more. Yet at the same time, our legislators are proposing regulation that tries to redefine what AI is. So I think, first of all, we need to decide what exactly is AI, because it's only a type of algorithm. It's nothing more. If you speak to a computer scientist, he'll say, this is an AI algorithm, or it's not. So are we talking about regulating software in general, or are we talking about regulating certain types of AI algorithms? And do we even need to, is another question. So I think the more philosophical debate is rather important to the space.
Well, yes, and we should also cover the open source issue, because to me, open source and regulation is always a contradiction.
Indeed, I think that's where your comment on market regulation, self-regulation, it's really relevant. Regulation isn't only hard regulation that legislators come up with. We have regulation that, as communities, we come up with. And the question that we need to ask is, do we need hard regulation all the time? Or do we need it in certain cases, let's say, where there's safety critical applications? And this is great where EU, they've kind of merged away or verge away from regulating AI. And they're really focusing now on regulating AI in certain sectors. But when it comes to open source, definitely, we need to think about whether we should leave market forces to play more and let users adopt the platforms that they wish to adopt rather than having just hard regulation.
Well, Cal, you are representing the business side. You are a legal counselor. And so you are directly confronted with these issues and have to deal for your clients with it. How do you evaluate what's going on right now? Are we on a good track, or are you growing gray hair?
I think those can be mutually exclusive questions, actually. But look, I mean, you have to break it into three main pillars, right? You have to look at the protocol, the ethical, and the legal. The protocol, what is it actually doing? As Joshua was rightly saying, what is the technology actually doing? Is it really true AI, or is this just some gimmick? Because we have to be realistic, and we know that AI, in some respects, is a bit of a gimmick fad. If I meet another person here that says, "Oh, we're embedding AI into our tech set," what does that even mean? Why are you doing it? Do you need it? That's the first thing. And then we look at the ethical side of things. Is it actually entering a sphere that has some kind of ethical approachment to it? So when we talk about AI, if we put that, for example, in the medical perspective, right, there is a very deep ethical question around artificial intelligence in the medtech space. What should AI do in a medtech space? Something as simple as a tech set around managing traffic signals in the UAE is now done by a lot of AI. Doesn't seem like an ethical question, but actually when you're managing almost 10 million people in a city using AI on their vehicles, and if you've driven around Dubai recently, it's kind of terrible. you start to, where is that ethical layer? And then finally, there's the legal perspective. Does it need to be regulated? Is this something we need to do, or are we wasting time? And unfortunately, AI is falling victim of its predecessor technology set, which is crypto, which everybody fell in love with. And I think regulators realized they were very late to the party, and everybody panicked when AI started coming down the pipeline. And I think if you look at what a lot of regulators are doing, they're realizing that they're knee jumping. They're going, oh, well, we kind of missed that crypto boat and things got crazy and we had to come in and deal after. But AI, we're not going to do that with. We're going to get in before you guys have a chance to do anything with it. So really, you have to look at all of those three things to understand how, if, when you advise people, you work with people, and then you can begin to understand what they actually need in terms of support, legal support, encouragement. And then you realize, you are growing white hairs.
Yeah, and it's also, I think we will have to get back to that a little while later, but now I want to address Pavel. And it all is also running in a very globalized market, cross-border, and this doesn't make it any easier. How do you deal with cross-border issues?
Well, as Professor Joshua has already noted, AI generally is not a new term. It's been introduced somewhere in the middle of 1950s. There are generally about 5 or 6 stages where we could see AI developing through all over the past years. Currently, from my standpoint, regulation of AI should not be any way different from regulating open source software. It should be based on the same pillars, on the same approaches to regulation, and generally the white papers, the approach of the regulators globally to tackle this issue, to regulate AI. In terms of speaking about ChatGPT or similar software, should be based on the same regulatory and legal pillars, the same approaches. So I suppose there should be, and there will be no difference in regulating open source software as you're feeling for a trademark application or a patent with the US Patent Office or the Patent Office in Europe or World Intellectual Property Organization. It should be no way be different in terms of approaches. Just to emphasize, currently we do have an effective legal regime allowing us to regulate open source software. So from my standpoint, AI being developed, as Professor Joshua mentioned, from the 1950s as a concept, as an idea, as a powerful imagination of what people can do, including the Kasparov's chess game. It was one of the main. It was a very big event in the history of AI. So when the human being and whether we are capable of beating the computer system. So generally, if we're speaking about the open source software, the principles of regulation should be the same.
Yeah. Okay. Now we talked about what it would be desired, how it would be desired to be. Now let's go to the different approaches we actually see as a status quo, because there are quite different approaches to it. In the USA, you have the wait and see approach, makes it very easier to develop stuff, while we here in Europe are much more restrictive and all try to avoid problems from the beginning. To give an example, the German media regulators just were calling for a white paper, and the title was the risks of AI for our democracy. Wrong approach, because they were ruling out the chances. And I think that's quite a big problem we are faced with here in Europe. How can we deal with it, or is there a way out of that?
So I think the discussion, if we ignore then the specific algorithm, say we're not regulating AI, we're not focusing on the type of algorithm, and we start focusing on the sectors and the platforms. So for example, if we're going to talk about social networks, social media platforms, let's talk about social media platforms. I don't care that they're using AI. They could have people behind a computer. It doesn't matter. But then it does become a concern. If we have social media platforms that are through their use, through society using them, we can manipulate society. We can manipulate politics. Then we do seriously need to consider, how do we regulate these types of platforms? And AI is a secondary discussion. That's just the type of algorithm that we're using. So I think it's a great step forward that EU has verged in this direction. But now we should really talk about the real challenges, the real effects on society, not the fact that it's an AI algorithm.
And Cal, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and I think Joshua is right. I think we have to look at what that actual technology is doing, because trying to explain anything to politicians is impossible. Trying to explain anything in a heavy tech set is like trying to get blood out of a stone. And when we talk about things in layers or in technology stepstones, I mean, I had a conversation with somebody the other day and I said, describe the difference between machine learning, big data, and AI to me, right? They're just arguably at some stage different analytical protocols. That's all they're doing. And at what point is the government going, oh, we have to regulate this, even though we're not regulating this? But if I peel back the layers, it's the same thing. It's doing the same thing. So the danger with it is regulators get hung up on what the technology is, not what the technology does, right? And in a voting sense, what wins votes? What gets public confidence? It's the bad guy, right? So the machines are going to come in and take over our jobs is a really nice political platform, right? It's the end goal. So we have to do something to stop that. But nobody wants to talk about the fact that actually the technology to take over those jobs has existed for the last 20 years. Nobody just did anything about it. But then it enters us into a really nice dialect of if you can be replaced by a machine, you're really good at your job. And is there a bigger underlying social element that actually better jobs need to be created? And maybe we need to focus shift on that. So we get this really cool situation where technology is opening up a very cool dialogue for everybody. But the problem with the dialogue is it tends to be one way. It tends to be politicians telling us what they think, and this is how it's going to work, and you have to work around it, rather than us telling telling them what's possible and the benefits it could really have on society.
Yeah, and but I'm also seeing that the legal system is still very old. So what's not in the legislation is not existing. Instead of going for the intent, you would have everything already ruled. No, cut and pasting. It's handwritten is covered, and cut and paste not anymore. That's in a way ridiculous. I think we also have to change our legal system completely. Or am I wrong?
Well, I don't think that any changes would be needed. So we would need to adjust the system as a way to embrace those changes, as the way to embrace the AI as a developing system. Again, there's nothing new about AI. It's been developed somewhere in the middle of the 1950s. Through different stages, different regulators, different countries, different people have been approaching the regulation of AI, have been approaching the issue of computer science and developing of the open source software, including AI. Again, ChatGPT is revolutionary in many ways in comparison to a typical open source software. However, I believe that the principle-based approach to regulation, such as the soft laws in particular and self-regulation, as you rightly have noted just earlier today, these mechanisms, these tools are quite enough for us to support the development. Ultimately, the thing is that it's AI, blockchain, distributed ledger technologies, DLT, fintech, and other emerging technologies, which commonly embraced under the umbrella of so-called ABCD technologies. A goes for artificial intelligence, B goes for blockchain, C goes for cloud, and D goes for big data. So these ABCD technologies can and will be regulated very effectively using the standard legal network existing for centuries. However, the ultimate question here, from my standpoint, is that whether regulation can and effectively would be stifling innovation. So if it would be able to stall our way towards developing some new things, towards developing new payment solutions, towards developing a new distributed ledger technology types from public towards consortia, federated and private networks, right? Like in DLT, the different types. But in the same manner as with blockchain, different types of DLT would impose different distribution of control issues. And here with AI, I couldn't quite see how the distribution of control, who is the controlling operator of an AI? Who would be responsible? Would it be Facebook, Elon Musk? I don't know. We need to tackle these issues much more effectively than we're currently doing, and regulators all over the world are currently approaching. But again, speaking about the code is law, speaking about the general issues of technologies jeopardizing our human values, as Professor Lessig has noted many years ago in his number of his books. There are a number of issues which are currently can be jeopardized by new technologies, including sovereignty, including privacy, including basically some of the issues attributed to a human being, like a typical human being. And from this standpoint, I don't quite see at this moment that in the forthcoming years, maybe 2 or 3 years to come, how the regulators would be able to tackle this important, these paramount issues, issues of paramount importance. But however, for the software code as an AI, it should be regulated in the same plain, easy, and straightforward way.
You're absolutely right. But on the other hand, we must not forget that the change, the speed of change will increase, and the technology, and it will be an unprecedented wave in the history of mankind. So we really have to get ready for that. So my very last question to you guys, just one sentence. What would be the ideal state of regulation to be in to get all your claims confirmed?
Regulate only where necessary. So if we're talking about safety critical applications, aviation, for example, highly regulate, make sure it's fit for purpose. Anything else, let it develop freely.
Accept that regulation is really only a social construct, and regulation only works around what people think and feel at the time. So let's all just start educating people on what AI really is, what it does, what it can do, what it's capable of. Get rid of the ghosts, get rid of the boogeymen, get rid of the stories. And if you do that, the regulation will follow suit.
Well, I believe, again, that as a software code, AI should be regulated in the same way as an open source software. However, we should embrace some new challenges that AI brings to the market, brings to the world, such as the question of division of liability charges and similar. So we would need to clearly be able to define who is the operator of AI in order to apply a particular degree of liability to a company or a person involved.
Okay, it was not my intent to save you a minute, but I did. Okay, thank you, everybody. And yeah, we hand over to the next panel.
The ones of you in the panel that were saying that we don't want, we better not have regulated and let the market run free. Don't you think that having a regulation, an enabling one, not a blocking one, will not make it easier for companies to be more safe and to know that they can get some kinds of a pre-ruling and then work more freely rather than having, regulation by enforcement as the U.S. state? Wouldn't you support that?
I love you for this question. So how many times have we seen regulators change their mind? It's like, oh, this is good. You guys are good? Joking. Now you're in trouble, right? We've seen that so many times. Clear frameworks work great. Tried and tested frameworks work even better. Give me case law, give me examples. So I think you never want to be the first person out there, right? So